In this lesson, we're going to be doing some complex numbers operations. We're going to add, subtract, and multiply various expressions. All right, on number one, we have like terms. This is like 1i plus 6i. That is going to be 7i. Looking at problem number two, these are the like terms right here. That's going to give us 7. So it's just going to be 7 plus 6i. Number 3, this is like 3i plus 1i, so that'll be 4i. Number 4, this is like negative 8i plus negative 7i. So this is going to make negative 15i. Just combining like terms so far. All right, on number 5, we have our negative 1 and negative 4 go together. They make negative 5. And then we have negative 8i and negative 1i, so that'll make negative 9i. On this one, we have 3 like terms. All right, we have the 7, the 4, and the 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. 7 and 8 make 15. So this is going to be 15, and then we just have plus I, the extra I. On number 7, a common mistake students will make is to distribute when they're not supposed to. This 6i will not distribute because there's a minus sign here. If there were no minus sign, then yes, we would distribute. But because of the minus sign, the only thing we're going to distribute is negative 1. That's all. So we'll do negative 1 times these two. That'll make this into a positive 5. Negative 1 times negative 3i is positive 3i. So that change has happened. Everything else is going to come down the same. So I'm going to have negative 3 plus 6i and minus 8i. Okay, this red part is the only part that changed. Now we can combine like terms. So we've got the negative 3 and the 5 will go together. That's positive 2. And then we'll have all 3 of these are like terms. So 6 plus 5 is 11. And then, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. 6 plus 3 is 9. And then 9 minus 8 is 1. So this will just be plus I, like a 1i. Okay, we have like terms here, here, and here. 3 plus 8 is 11. 11 minus 7 is 4. So we're going to have a 4 in the front. And then we have 3i and negative 2i. 3 minus 2 is 1. So this will just be plus I. All right, here we have to distribute the 4i. So 4i times negative 2 is going to be negative 8i. Now, 4i times negative 8i is going to be negative 32, but be careful, it'll be I squared, because I times I is I squared. Now remember that I squared is negative 1. So this I squared has a value of negative 1. So really, we are multiplying negative 32 times negative 1. That's going to change this to a positive 32. And I've still got my negative 8i. Last, we need to reverse these because the I term has to come second. So your final answer should be 32 minus 8i. Okay, see this dot is the dot of multiplication. So 5 times negative I, this is like a negative 1. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. I times I is I squared, but don't leave it like that. All right, remember that the I squared is a negative 1. So 5 times negative 1 is going to be positive 5. Alright, when you multiply three things together, you should just do two at a time. So if I multiply these two together, then I get 5i squared, that's an I, and then I still have my times negative 2i waiting around. But let's finish this. I squared is negative 1. So that's going to turn this into negative 5. So now I have negative 5 times negative 2i. Multiply that, you're going to get a positive 10 with your I. Alright, here, negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. I times I is I squared. But I squared is negative 1. So this will change this to a positive 20. When you multiply binomials, you have to FOIL it, or do the distributive property twice. Negative 2 times 4 is going to give me negative 8. And then negative 2 times I is going to give me negative 2i. And then we'll do I times 4, negative I times 4, that's negative 4i, and negative I times I, that's going to be negative I squared. Now remember that I squared is negative 1. So that's going to give me, when I combine like terms, so I've got negative 8, guess I might as well put these together. Alright, combining these like terms, I've got negative 6i. Now, this is negative I squared, so understand that that's negative 1. So this is going to be a positive 1. And negative 8 plus 1 is negative 7, so the final answer will be negative 7 minus 6i. And here again, we will have to FOIL this or double distribute. 7 times negative 8 is going to be negative 56. 7 times 3 is 21, so that's 21i. Now we will distribute the negative 6i. Negative times negative is a positive, so that's positive 48i. And negative 6 times positive 3 is negative 18. I times I is I squared. If we put these together, let's see, that's going to make 69i. And then I'll bring down the negative 56. Now this I squared, you know, is negative 1. So I've got negative 18 times negative 1. It's going to change to a positive 18. And then it's a matter of just putting the negative 6 plus the 18. So that gives us negative 38 plus 69i. Be careful. This is not a binomial. I am not going to FOIL this because this is multiplication happening right now. So I will definitely go ahead and just multiply these two together. So that's going to give me 21i squared. But I squared is negative 1. So that's going to turn this into negative 21. And then I've got the rest of it. So now I just distribute, but I'm only distributing negative 21. So negative 21 times negative 8. Negative times negative is positive. And let's see, 21 times 8 is 168. So this makes 168. Again, negative times negative is a positive. 21 times 6 is 126. So that's it for number 15. Now this is a binomial times a binomial, so we will FOIL or double distribute. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 1i is 4i. All right, now we will distribute the negative 5i. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20, so negative 20i. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5, but I times I is I squared. Okay, so that's going to give us, all right, if you combine these like terms, that's going to give us negative 16i. I squared is negative 1. So that's going to switch this to a positive 5. And then 16 plus 5 is 21. So the final answer will be 21 minus 16i. All right, again, we're going to FOIL this. So 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. 2 times 4i is positive 8i. And then we'll distribute the negative 4i. Negative times negative is a positive 24i. Negative 4 times positive 4 is negative 16. I times I is I squared. Putting these like terms together is going to give us 32i. Bring down the negative 12. Now I squared is negative 1. That's going to change this negative 16 to a positive 16. Negative 12 plus 16 is 4. So the final answer is going to be 4 plus 32i. Okay, another FOIL problem. So we will distribute negative 3 times negative 6 is positive 18. Negative 3 times negative 8 is a positive 24, so 24i. Now we distribute the 2i. 2 times negative 6 is negative 12, so negative 12i. 2 times negative 8 is negative 16. I times I is I squared. All right, combine these like terms, and you're going to get 12i. Bring down your 18. I squared is negative 1. That's going to change this negative 16 to a plus 16. All right, 18 plus 16. So that's going to give us 34 plus 12i. All right, number 19, another FOIL problem. All right, 8 times negative 4, that's going to be negative 32. 8 times negative 4i, that's negative 32i. All right, now we will distribute the negative 6i. That's going to give us negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24i. Negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24i squared, because I times I is I squared. All right, as you combine these like terms, you're going to get negative 8i. Remember that I squared is negative 1. So that's going to change this to a negative 24. And bring down your negative 32. All right, just combine these two, and you're going to get negative 56 minus 8i. Okay, understand that when you square a binomial, you can't just square the individual parts. You have to go 1 minus 7i times 1 minus 7i. So we will have to double distribute. So we will distribute the 1. All right, that's going to give us 1 minus 7i. And then we will distribute the negative 7i. Negative 7i times 1 is negative 7i. Negative 7i times negative 7i is positive 49i squared. Okay, combining these like terms, that's going to give us negative 14i. I squared is negative 1, so that's going to make this a negative 49. And you bring down the 1. So just putting these like terms together, 1 and minus 49 is going to be negative 48. So negative 48 minus 14i. So in this one, we actually have 3 things being multiplied together. So you're just going to have to do 2 of them at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and do these 2 first. So that would just be a simple, good old-fashioned distributive property. So that's going to give us negative 42 and then 36i. So that's still there. Now bring down the other binomial. And we will double distribute this. So if I take this negative 42, later. So let's see, negative 42 times negative 4. Let's see, negative 42 times negative 4. That's going to give me positive 168. Now, negative 42 times 2i is going to be negative 84. Excuse me. It's going to be negative 84i. Okay, now I'm going to have to do 36i times these 2 guys. So let's see, 36 times 4 is 144. So that's going to be negative 144i. And then 36 times 2 is going to be 72, and then I squared. All right, combine these like terms, and this is going to add up to be a big negative number. So I've got, if we do 84 plus 144, that's, I'm going to get negative 228i. Now remember that I squared is negative 1, so that's going to change this to a negative 72. And then bring down your 168. Now if I put these together, 168 minus 72. All right, that gives us 96. So it's just 96 minus 228i. Whoa, look at all those numbers, man. All right, you can pick any 2 of these and do them. So I'm just going to go in order. So basically, first, I'm going to do these 2. All right, so just kind of forget about that one. So if I double distribute over here, all right, let's see, negative 2 times negative 4, that's going to be 8. Negative 2 times negative 3i, that's going to be positive 6i. And then I'm going to do this guy. So negative 2i times negative 4, that's positive 8i. Negative 2i times negative 3i, that's positive 6i squared. Okay, now this I squared is going to make this into a negative 6. I'm going to save a little bit of space now because I see so much work ahead. So can you see that this I squared is going to change this into a negative 6? Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and make that into a negative 6. Okay, so now combining these like terms, 8 minus 6 is 2. So now I've got 2. Now these middle guys together, that's going to make 14. So I've got 2 plus 14i. So that's what you get from that. Now we still have this, so I'm just going to bring that down. So I'm going to bring down my 7 plus 8i. And then I'm going to double distribute again. So I'm going to do 2 times everything. So 2 times 7, I've got 14. 2 times 8 is 16i. And then, let's see, 14 times 7, I don't know that one off the top of my head. That's 98. So that gives me 98i. Now 14 times 8 is 112. So for a second I've got 112i squared. But again, I squared is -1. So that's going to change this to a -112. All right, so then I can go ahead and combine like terms. So if I put these together, 16 plus 98, that's 114. Okay, so I've got 114i. Now if I put these together, 14 minus 112, that's going to be -98. All right, for number 23, you do have to remember the order of operations, because we've got addition and we've got multiplication. All right, but multiplication definitely comes before addition, so you cannot add these and get 12. You have to multiply these first, so that's going to give us 7i squared. So I've got 5i plus 7i squared. Now, you know that I squared is -1. Okay, so that's going to make this into 5i minus 7. And really we just need to switch these around because the I term has to come second. So that's just going to give us -7 plus 5i. Final answer. All right, looking at 24. Now we need to cube these things. Now remember that cubing something means multiplying it by itself 3 times. So it's like 6i times 6i times 6i. So we could just take this 2 at a time. Okay, so if I multiply these together, all right, 6 times 6 is 36. That's 36i squared, right? But then you know I squared is -1. Okay, so because that's -1, then what I really have is a -36. And then we can just bring down our other 6i. So really it's just a matter of -36 times the other 6i. And so I don't know what 36 times 6 is off the top of my head. That's 216. So that's going to be -216i. All right, number 25. Again, order of operations. You really have to do your multiplication before you do any addition. So this is going to give us -24i squared. All right, but I squared is -1, so that's going to change this to a +24. Okay, so that's just going to give us 32. Now here I've got just a basic distributive property, so that's going to give us -24 plus 36i. And that's it. That's all there is to that. That's pretty simple. Again, when you have a binomial squared, you cannot just square the parts. This is 8 minus 3i times 8 minus 3i. So we will have to do our double distributive property. We've got to FOIL it, if that's how you call it. So 8 times 8 is 64. 8 times -3 is -24, so -24i. and then we will turn around and distribute the negative 3i. Negative 3i times 8 is negative 24i, and negative 3i times negative 3i. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, but then that's I squared. Because I squared is negative 1, that's going to turn this to a negative 9 with no i's. Putting this together, that's going to be negative 48i. And I'm just bringing down the 64. So it's just a matter of what's 64 minus 9. Well, 64 minus 10 would be 54. So this must be 55. Okay, and let's see, 28. All right, we're not foiling, all right? There are no parentheses happening. We're just combining like terms. So 3 minus 4 is negative 1. And then 7 minus 3 is 4. So that's a positive 4i. And that's all. Okay, be careful. So these two are just being multiplied together. So let's get that out of the way. So that's going to make this negative 18. Whoops. I should have left it so I could catch my copiers. That's going to make this negative 18i squared. All right. We will also have to distribute this negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 7 is positive 21. And then this will be negative 18i. Okay. Now I squared is negative 1. So negative 18 times negative 1 is positive 18. So I'm going to have positive 18 and then plus 21 minus 18i. So it's just a matter of putting these together. So that's going to make 39 and then minus 18i. Okay, 3 things to multiply together. So I'm just going to do the first two first. Okay, so if I distribute this negative 6i, that's going to give me negative 48i and positive 36i squared. Okay, now of course I squared is negative 1, so that's going to change this to a negative 36 with no i's. And I'll bring down my negative 48i. So that's what I get from distributing. So now I'm going to take that and I'm just going to bring down the rest of it, the negative 8 minus 8i. Now I need to double distribute again. So I'm going to take my negative 48i and distribute. Negative times negative is a positive. 48 times 8 is 384. So that's giving me 384i. Okay. So again, see I have another 8 happening, so that's going to be another 384. So but this time it'll be positive 384i squared because I have I times I now. So there's that. Okay, now I'm going to distribute the negative 36. So negative times negative is a positive. All right, 36 times 8 is 288. All right, so that'll be another positive 288, but this time I have the I. Okay, now remember, I squared is negative 1. Okay, so this I squared is going to make this a negative 384. okay, with no I squared. So let's go from there. So combining like terms. So now, all right, I've got my negative 384 and my positive 288. So negative 384 plus 288, that is negative 96. Is there space for this over here? Okay. So that gives me negative 96. And now my other like terms, I've got 384 and 288i. So 384 plus 288. That's 672. So that'll be all positive 672i. All right, now we got these critical thinking problems. How are these problems different? All right, so the only thing that's different in the way that it's set up is that we have I and versus we have X. So let's check it out. If I did the top one, all right, of course we're doing the double distributive property. So that's going to give us 6 and then 2 times, so it's negative 4x. And then we could do the x, so that's going to give us 3x, and then we'll get negative 2x squared. Okay, so looking at this to help me do it faster, I'm just going to copy, because so far that part would all be the same. So this is just going to be 6 minus 4i plus 3i minus 2i squared. So here's where the difference comes in. X squared is just x squared, but I squared equals negative 1. Okay? X squared stays x squared, but I squared equals negative 1. That's the difference. So if we follow through on this, this top problem, I need to do it over again. So the top problem becomes, I've got my negative 2x squared, and putting these two together just gives me negative x and then plus 6. All right, that's what the first one gives us. But on the bottom problem, I squared is negative 1. So that's going to make this into a positive 2. So now I have 6 and 2, so that's going to give me 8. And then minus I, putting these two together. Okay, so very different answers because I squared is negative 1, where x squared, you don't do anything with it. All right, last problem. How are these two different? All right, well, let's start it out. In both cases, we're going to distribute this negative 1. Okay, so here, I'm just going to recopy the 2 plus x part. And down here, I'm going to recopy the 2 plus I part. Okay. Now, distributing that negative 1 is going to give me negative 3 minus, no, negative times negative is positive, so plus 2x. And here I'm going to have negative 3 plus 2i. So far everything is the same. Okay, as I combine these like terms, and I think this is really the only thing that's going to be different. All right, the top problem with the x's. We have 1x plus 2x, so that's going to give us 3x. So I'm going to have 3x. Now 2 minus 3 is 1. Sorry, negative 1. So I have 3x minus 1. Now the same thing is going to happen down here, but the I term goes second. So when we do the 2 minus 3 and we get the negative 1, the negative 1 goes first. When we do the I and the 2i to get 3i, that goes second. So that's really the only difference. So the difference is the x term goes first, but the I term comes second.
Hello, Mr. Burton.
Hello.
How was your weekend?
It was great. How was your weekend?